The point is, Mags should have never gotten into the industry. If she gets in accidentally due to wokeness, DEI, whatever, once people realize that Mags is a fraud, that Mags is a lunatic, that Mags tries to destroy people who tried to help her, that Mags lobs false accusations at people, that should have been the end. And honestly, Darrick Robertson even taking 30 minutes to draw this as a favor. Why is anyone doing a favor for Mags in 2023? Because that's the date down here, 2023. Like, seriously, Darrick, this is where you are 30 years into your career. But this is where people find themselves, in a desperate, insolvent, collapsing industry.
Welcome back to the channel, everyone. I'm Saladino. So, Mags Visaggio's Superboy is really a trans girl pitch is so bad that I'm surprised DC didn't just approve it. I think it's one of those things that if somebody like Jadzia Axelrod, or whatever that person's name is, if that person wrote the pitch, I'm pretty sure DC would have approved of it. I think the only reason why, at this point, this skyrocket proposal got rejected is because Mags has burned so many bridges in the industry, because Mags is an idiot. And the only thing I know about Mags is what your boy Zach has talked about. And despite the turbulent history that Mags and your boy Zach has had, I did read one comic from Mags, the Jenny Hex one-shot that your boy Zach recommended. And it did turn out to be actually pretty entertaining, and it was well drawn, and it was actually a good book. And at the time, I remember your boy Zach saying, it sucks that, Mags could probably be a much better writer than they've shown if they're allowed to write something that they really want to write, as opposed to just being this diversity hire, who's, the person who you go to write the trans people, or the lesbians, or the queer people, or whatever. Because apparently there was an interview about this Jenny Hex book, and Mags was saying something like, I really love Superboy. I'd love to write Superboy. And I don't know, this Jenny Hex book was part of some kind of pocket universe by Brian Michael Bendis that he was working on. I don't know. But Bendis put Mags on Jenny Hex instead of Superboy. Now, at the time, it was like, that sucks. The blacks got to write the blacks and the gays got to write the gays kind of thing, right? But probably, even back then, because I wonder how long Mags has been thinking of Connor Kent as a trans allegory. I wouldn't be surprised if Mags had already started saying to Bendis that, hey, you know what? Connor Kent seems like a trans girl. Maybe we should set things up to do that. And Bendis was like, okay, yeah, you know what? No. Right now, we're just you're writing Jenny Hex. That's it. So I read the pitch. It is terrible. I thought that if I read the pitch, it would at least be interesting to see a full-blown comics pitch from a writer and just see how those things look and how they're presented. And the thing that stood out to me the most in this pitch is how Mags, and really not just Mags, and this goes beyond just comic book pitches and everything. This is something I think fundamental about this whole gender ideology, like shtick. Mags and other trans people and gender non-binary, all this stuff, these people think that being trans and being non-binary is this special thing that no one else can identify with. And then they act like, well, because no one understands us, that's why we're being persecuted. They have this special knowledge that the world is just trying to suppress. But so the pitch goes on to describe like this big 12 to 24 issue epic. And the thing is, everything that Mags is talking about and the conclusions that Mags arrives at doesn't make sense. Like, it doesn't make sense that this means I'm really a woman. So I'm playing this game called Mutazione, and it's boring as hell. The problem is, the main reason, like, it looks great, right? But the problem is, it was sold by indie game YouTube channels as a soap opera in the style of like a telenovela. But it's nothing like a soap opera or a telenovela. It's nothing like that. It's more like what an SJW considers a soap opera. And it's very like safe and lame and boring, and not boring in a Eric Romer way, like unironically boring. It's boring and like legitimately, this stuff is not interesting. There are no stakes. The things that they think of as stakes are really stupid stuff, like, you know, one character plays the secret love song of another character, and she plays it at a bar in front of everybody, and the song reveals that this guy, the bartender, loves this mutant girl or whatever, and it's embarrassing. But also, for some reason, the woman who the song is about, who actually loves the guy who wrote the song too, instead of her just going, oh my god, this is embarrassing, but hey, let's talk about this, she just gets up all upset for some reason and runs out talking about she doesn't understand this well of emotion. She doesn't know how to process all the different emotions of somebody made a song for her and she's devastated by it for whatever stupid fucking reason. And then the guy who wrote the song, he's all like, you don't understand boundaries. Why don't you respect my boundaries? And this is supposed to be a straight guy yelling about his boundaries and why you didn't respect my boundaries. Of course, men have boundaries and should have boundaries, but they don't talk about boundaries like a teenage girl on Tumblr does. But anyway, but there is one good part where you go off with the little cat creature at some point to the secret little pond. You're just in the pond, chilling in the pond, and the little cat creature asks you or your character, do you like your body, or something like that? And your character replies, does anyone? And that's the thing. That's the thing about this pitch, and that's the thing about how people, I think normally people are way ahead of SJWs and trans activists and gender abolitionists about a lot of these things. And that's what's so frustrating about the culture war, because the people who are arguing about the things like diversity and inclusion and representation are far behind the people who are actually invested in these different hobbies and interests. Being trans is not special. It's not that deep. It's not that complicated for someone who's on the outside looking in. So it's one of those things that's like, people understand, even if they don't know why someone is trans. People understand that people have anxiety, depression, sadness, chronic pain, self-conscious about their body, all these things. People get that there's something in your body that you don't feel right about. And when you look at this stupid pitch, the things that Mags describes in this 12 to 24 issue epic that's supposed to take place, right? All the stuff that Connor is supposedly going through, none of it seems to end with, I'm really a woman. Like, it doesn't make sense that at the conclusion of all this stuff, you realize that you're trans. Like, it doesn't make any goddamn sense. And it's like, in the sanity of the pitch, it's like, Mags thought that this could be an entire Superman line event. All of this about how Connor Kent becomes trans and ends up looking like a fucking goofball. At one point, Mags goes, what follows could be contained in one book or spread out to the entire Superline. Connor raises the war banner and does his best to embody the spirit of Superman for this new age, and after 6 bone-rattling issues, the Superiors fall, and hope is restored to the galaxy, but Connor doesn't seem to be celebrating. He seems more morose and angry than ever, and Clark can see it more clearly than anyone. He brings this up to his younger clone brother, and Connor can't entirely articulate what's wrong, but he gets out enough. I spent this whole battle being you, Clark, and that didn't feel like me. And then the dam bursts. He tells Clark how he's been feeling, how this quest was supposed to reinvigorate him, offer him clarity, but he's more confused than ever. He did the thing he thought he was born to do. He became Superman, and it still wasn't right. So who the fuck is he if he's not Superman? The quest didn't give him a better sense of identity. It just underlined how little he has of his own. And what's worse, this future doesn't even know a Connor Kent Superboy existed. I know I keep repeating this point, but again, none of this sounds like it would lead to someone going, I'm a woman. And that's all of this pitch. Like, a lot of this pitch is just stupid stuff. Like Connor being annoyed that this future timeline that Connor gets to be Superman and restore order because descendants of Superman became these evil, warlords or whatever. And Connor's mad that history doesn't have records of his existence as Superboy from the past. It's like, this is just this obsession of like, people don't recognize me. They don't know who I am. They don't appreciate that I exist. It's like a lot of trans people do seem to have narcissism. And particularly the activists, the performative ones. There seems to be this issue with narcissism. And so it's like, not to get into it too much because I don't know what's really going on with trans people. But I feel like it's an issue that doesn't have to do with society. Society shouldn't really be dragged into this. This is something between you and your family and friends, your counselor, and if you want to transition. But this thing that just because somebody is angry and confused and they don't know who they're supposed to be doesn't mean that they're a woman. And it doesn't mean that just because you put on a dress and a wig and you wear makeup, that makes you a woman. The fact that Mags kept saying throughout this thing, this is so trans. This issue with identity. Like there was some part where Mags even says something like Connor can't, the anger and the rage and the almost like the violence that he was feeling is how a lot of suppressed trans men feel. And trans women feel. And it's like, yeah, duh, we've seen how violent trans women can get. In fact, if I remember it right, Mags physically threatened to beat your boy Zach with a baseball bat. So Mags is a violent trans woman too. And people know that trans women can be violent. That's kind of the reason why we don't want trans women in women's spaces, So it's so funny how many self-owns and how a lack of self-awareness Mags has in talking about this issue. And so for me, I thought I was going to use your boy Zach's video to sort of add to, his whole assertion that Mags shouldn't even have the number or the email of people he could pitch something this stupid to. And that's absolutely correct. But also, it really is an interesting sort of look at the mind of a sort of loud and proud trans person who seems completely deluded, not just about their gender identity, but how they're perceived and the effect that they have on other people. Mags took Superboy. Instead of telling us a universal story about a superhero struggling to find their place in the world or the DC multiverse or whatever, Mags decides to tell a story about how feeling like this means that you're trans. That's it. That's one of the best arguments against having people who lead with identity working on projects that are supposed to entertain a variety of people. If they're so particular that instead of being universal, as superhero characters should be, they're extremely not only niche, alienating, and off-putting, why bother? What's the point of Connor Kent being a trans woman? You already have women. Connor Kent being a trans woman, and the thing is, Darrick Robertson is hilarious. These drawings or whatever. Even Connor Kent has to have a realistic and approved body type.